Well, good evening once again, and welcome to Wednesday night Bible study. And wasn't Sunday a wonderful day, and Sunday a week ago a wonderful day, and how good it is to be back in the sanctuary. And I appreciate so much, so many of you being there. I thought we had super crowds both Sundays. But here we are now, the middle of the week, Wednesday night. And let's get started very quickly. And if you had to ask me if I had a favorite Broadway show, I would have to pick Fiddler on the Roof, one of my two favorites. And if you ask me, well, do you have a favorite song from Fiddler on the Roof? I would tell you yes, If I Were a Rich Man. Now, some of you may remember at Central, 25, 30 years ago, you'll have to tell me, I remember being in the fellowship hall one night when the Roses Choir did a wonderful music program. And Ashley would have been about 11, 10, 8, I don't know how old she was, sat on the piano, on the top of the piano, and played like she was playing a violin. She had a violin, and John Marshall did a rip-roaring job of If I Were a Rich Man, dancing and stomping around like a Russian, and it was just absolutely wonderful. Now, if you're wondering where I'm going with all this, here it is. Tonight, I want to talk about Solomon, just a little bit. And in If I Were a Rich Man, Tevye, the one who sings it, who John Marshall was playing, said that he wanted to be like Solomon the Wise. And you know, the Jewish people of that time thought that Solomon was the wisest, smartest person in the world. But tonight, I want us to see the transition from Solomon being the smartest, wisest person in the world to our Lord Jesus Christ. So, I want to tell you something you probably already know. We live in something called the post-Christian era. And most people say that it started right about the turn of the century that we're in. And in that post-Christian era, there are many people and countless groups who are doing their dead level best to say that Christianity, that God, that Jesus Christ are strictly myths or legends, and that they're not really valid. And the sad thing is, if you think about what you hear on the news and what's happening in our world today, but particularly in our country, it's getting worse. And it's nothing new. It's been going on since Jesus' time. Many, since Jesus' time, who have set out to silence Jesus and the Christian movement have said in the end, and this is coming from the book of John, no one ever spoke like this man, talking about Jesus. One reason is the incomparable wisdom and knowledge that Christ has. The Queen of Sheba in the book of 1 Kings was so stunned at the wisdom and knowledge that Solomon had when she had seen his house and heard his answers to her questions. She said, "There was no more breath in me." She's saying that his knowledge and his wisdom took her breath away. What then does it mean when Jesus says in Matthew, "The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, something greater than Solomon is here." There's been a shift from the most wisdom with Solomon to the most wisdom with Christ. And not even the wisest of all kings or prophets spoke like this man Jesus. Here's one who has come onto the scene of history unparalleled in knowledge and in wisdom. Up to a point, Jesus was willing to dialogue with the wise men of his day. But when the hour was come, and when he was ready, he spoke the decisive sentence, friends, that ended all conversation. That sentence we find in Matthew, and it says, "If David then calls him Lord, how is he his son?" And no one was able to answer him a word. nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions. His knowledge and his wisdom made him master of every situation. And one reason we have to admire and trust Jesus above all other people is that his knowledge and wisdom are unsurpassed. He is truly the only know-it-all that ever walked the face of the earth. He knows us. He knows all people thoroughly, our hearts and our thoughts. John paid tribute to this vast knowledge when he said that Jesus did not entrust himself to men because, and this is coming from John now, he knew all people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in man. He knows all of our thoughts before they ever come out of our mouths. He sees where no one else can see. Nothing is hidden from Jesus' eyes. Matthew tells us, but Jesus, knowing your thoughts, said, "Why do you think evil in your hearts?" Thus, it was the confession of the early church that came from that sentence right there. You, Lord, that confession says, know the hearts of all. There's no one who is able to confuse or surprise Jesus. No thought or action is unintelligible to him. He gets it all. He knows its origin and he knows its end. The most convoluted psycho and the most intelligent genius are open and laid bare to his understanding. He understands every motion of every mind. And Jesus not only knows all of us as we are today, he knows who we were yesterday, and he knows who we're going to be for all eternity. He knows all things that are going to come to pass. And John's gospel stresses this because John sees it as a part of Jesus' divine majesty. Hear these words. Jesus knew all that would happen to him, coming from John. And on the basis of this knowledge, he told them many things that his friends and his enemies would do. Jesus knew from the very beginning who would betray him. From now on, he said, I am telling this to you before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am. In other words, the reason he foretold so many things is so that we might believe that he is. But the question is, he is what? That he is, and here's the answer to that, he's the divine Son of God. I am, you know, is the name for God in Exodus. And it's the designation of the deity in the book of Isaiah. And this probably is the way Jesus understood it when he used the words clearly, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Jesus wants us to know and to believe that he is God. That's why he says, see, I have told you beforehand. His foreknowledge, folks, is essential to his divinity. The extent of Jesus' knowledge is a compelling reason for faith in his divine origin. His disciples said, now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. At the end of his time on earth, Jesus queried Peter 3 times. Simon, he said, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he had said to him the 3rd time, do you love me? And then Peter said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Peter did not conclude from Jesus' knowledge of Peter's heart that he knew all things. Rather, he concluded from the omniscience of Jesus that he, Jesus, knew his heart. You know everything is a general and unqualified statement of John's gospel. Jesus knows all that is and all that ever will come to pass. And the closest thing to a contradiction of this claim we find in Matthew, where Jesus says concerning his second coming, which we know very little about, Jesus says, concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, talking about himself, but the Father only. Only God knows. What this means that in his human nature, Jesus did not know when the second coming was, but in his divine nature, he may well have. One of the greatest mysteries of the whole universe is how Jesus coexists perfectly, partly divine, partly completely God. And if you ever find somebody who can define that correlation between divinity and humanity and knows how it works, get it from them. I want to know it. No one but Jesus knows the Father completely and perfectly. Our knowledge of God depends totally on Jesus' gracious revelation. Our knowledge is derived from what Jesus has given to us. And our knowledge of Jesus is partial. And because of our sin, it's not perfect. We can't see Jesus totally. Remember what Paul says, we look through a glass dimly or darkly. Nothing greater can be said about the knowledge of Jesus than that he does know God perfectly. All reality outside of God is very small compared to the infinite reality that God is. And I know this is getting deep, but I want you to pay attention and grab hold of what I'm trying to say. What God has made in this whole universe, everything that God put together, is a toy compared to the complexity and the depth of who and what our God is. All the science that we have that scratches the surface of this created universe are just mere ABCs compared to Jesus' total knowledge of the same created universe. And even this knowledge of the universe is like a dewdrop on a blade of grass compared to that ocean of knowledge that Jesus has of the being, the essence of God himself. While the universe is finite, as big as it is, it's finite. There's a beginning and there's an end. God is infinite. Complete knowledge of infinite is infinite. Therefore, to know God as Jesus knows God is to have the same thing that God has. Jesus has infinite knowledge. So, therefore, it's imperative that we bow down and worship Jesus Christ. Not a myth, not a legend, not just a feel-good tradition, but a real being that was alive and died and arose for us. And even if we're impressed with the scholarship of mankind and the achievements that scientific knowledge has made, we cannot play the fool by trumpeting the wonder of these tiny chirps of knowledge while we ignore the huge thunderclaps of Christ's omniscience. Jesus alone, the operative word, is worthy of our highest admiration. Jesus alone is worthy of our trust. He is able to show us the Father. That's what Matthew told us. He can give us irresistible wisdom. Luke gives us those words. He can see how to make all things work together. How? For our good. Paul tells us that in the book of Romans. And here's the most wonderful thing that I think I want to say tonight. Not one of his judgments about anything, folks, has ever been mistaken. Jesus and God make no mistakes. Jesus teaches the way